Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where yesterday when I left the office at the end of the day, I had my 3 stories already picked out for today's episode of Morning Movie News. And only one still remains come this morning because late last night I decided, like I always do before I went to sleep, I checked my phone and I checked the major Hollywood trades to see if there were any developing stories, which occasionally happens. But last night, there were 2. And one in particular really blew my mind. So much so that I put a poll up on my Twitter account to ask you guys what you thought of it. And that's the news that Woody Harrelson is in talks to join the Han Solo movie as Han Solo's mentor. And so, before I tell you how I reacted, let me tell you how you guys are reacting. I gave you 3 choices. Awesome, jumping the shark, or yikes, but I love Woody Harrelson in anything, right? So, awesome won at 57%. But as you can see, it's really split in terms of positive and negative, right? So 24% of you felt it was jumping the shark, and then 19% of you said, yikes, but I love Woody Harrelson in anything. And I think I fall into that last category. I mean, I reserve the right to switch to awesome once I see the trailer. I have tremendous faith in Phil Lord and Chris Miller. But right now, I'm sensing Woody Harrelson doing a Han Solo impression for 2 hours, right? Where they're like, how did Han Solo become the way he is? Because he's imitating Woody Harrelson, right? And I don't like that idea. I don't like the idea. I would love it if Woody Harrelson was a totally different type of person. Like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker. Very different individuals, at least at that point in Obi-Wan Kenobi's life, right? He lost a little bit of his pizzazz when he was Ben Kenobi, right? And he's not quite the happy-go-lucky character that Ewan McGregor played early on in the prequels. But anyway, I don't like this idea of there being a mentor and, Han Solo following someone else around. I mean, as it is, he's already sharing this movie with Lando Calrissian, who I think he's going to have to compete very strongly with. I think, as I said just yesterday, I think there's a very good chance the Han Solo movie could end up being the Lando movie. But will it, now that we have to also have time for Woody Harrelson? But the other thing that bothered me about the casting is that, well, here's the thing. I'm very happy for Woody Harrelson. I love Woody Harrelson. I think he's such a talented actor, and I think he often doesn't get credit for what he contributes to a property. For instance, in True Detective, everyone was like, Matthew McConaughey, you're so amazing. But that project wouldn't have worked without Woody Harrelson being the yin to Matthew McConaughey's yang. I really think Woody Harrelson is a talented, hardworking actor. So I'm very happy that he would get himself into a brand like Star Wars. That's so exciting. Although he was in the Hunger Games, right? Although minimally. I wouldn't really call Woody Harrelson a main character in the Hunger Games, right? So anyway, and it looks like they're never going to make that Hey Mitch prequel, but he wouldn't be in that anyway unless they had like flashbacks, right? My problem is that when I see Woody Harrelson in anything, like the upcoming War of the Planet of the Apes, right? I see Woody Harrelson because he's such a big star at this point. We've known him for so long. I mean, this is a guy who debuted back in, on television on Cheers for many, many, many seasons, right? It's very hard to transition from TV to film, especially back when Woody Harrelson did it, so that's commendable as well. But anyway, I think that Star Wars really should focus on unknowns, right? I mean, how could he be in War of the Planet of the Apes and in Star Wars, right? I mean, I know obviously that he can, but I feel like with blockbuster filmmaking, if they're going to go and get a major actor, I feel that actor needs to commit. Like Hugh Jackman, he said he was offered James Bond and he turned it down, thank goodness, but he will forever be Wolverine. That's Hugh Jackman's franchise, right? And I feel to have multiple franchises turns those things, instead of a major commitment and a part of becoming an iconic character, into just another gig, right? And I would hate to start seeing actors, traipse through Star Wars films collecting a paycheck, right? And if they're just collecting paychecks, will they do the character work that's necessary? Although Forrest Whitaker did an awful lot of work in Rogue One, and it ended up on the cutting room floor. But still, I really, and Ben Mendelsohn, to be fair, it was very iconic as Orson Krennic in Rogue One, and he's going to be the Sheriff of Nottingham in the upcoming Robin Hood movie. Let's see how that works. But I think that, I think Woody Harrelson isn't a character actor. He's always Woody Harrelson, although he's really good at it. And I just feel like in the Han Solo movie, I feel like also my other concern is that everyone they're casting, I think, is going to pull major focus from Alden Ehrenreich. Like, I don't think Alden Ehrenreich has a lot of charisma to begin with and a lot of pull, like star power. So when you stick Donald Glover next to him, which is I was already concerned about, and then you put Woody Harrelson on the other side, is anyone going to look in the middle? So we'll see how this turns out. But I just don't, it's only in talks. We'll see if it gels. But the Woody Harrelson fan in me hopes it works out for him, because that would be really nice for him as an actor. But I think maybe not so great for the property itself. But I'm very curious. I have mixed emotions about it, so I'm curious to hear how you guys feel. Feel free to work out your own thoughts on it down below. All right, so the second story that ended up getting a spot on today's list is also something that broke late in the day. And they made it a big headline on Deadline. They were like, oh, click here. And I was like, well, I don't think the Stallone Adam Driver movie that's being shopped around is that big a headline. I don't think it's worth being put at the top of the website. But, it's slow news time. But there is something interesting going on here, which is why it made today's episode. So Sylvester Stallone, it's been packaged. He's packaged a movie, and they're shopping it around to distributors. And it's an adaptation of Travis Miller's autobiography, Tough as They Come. And Travis Miller is a soldier in the U.S. Army who was one of the few people to survive being a quadruple amputee. That means having both of his arms and his legs amputated. And when he comes home and has to transition and get, fake limbs, his father-in-law is extremely supportive of him from the very beginning all the way through the process, which I have to say is pretty amazing for a father-in-law to do that for, it's his son-in-law, but still that's an unusual bond. So I'm very impressed with that. So Sylvester Stallone wants to direct, and he wants to also play the father-in-law, and then Adam Driver is signed on to be Travis Miller to play the amputee soldier. And that's really interesting for Adam Driver, because not only is he Kylo Ren and from Girls, although I don't think his star has quite risen to the front as much as I think everybody was anticipating. But anyway, Adam Driver was in the Army. That's where he started out, actually. He enlisted after 9/11. He served a tour, and then I believe, went to Juilliard. So he's a really interesting combination. And I think that he could bring a lot of, realism to the role, and also it would be great for awards campaigning, which obviously they want to do. Now, Stallone finds himself in an interesting position, just to give you a little perspective on what's going on here. So Sylvester Stallone is very good friends with Donald Trump, and he was offered to head up or to co-head the National Endowment for the Arts by Donald Trump. And he turned it down because he said he wants to focus on bringing attention to troops who come home and how they reintegrate into society and the troubles that they face. But, Stallone is still very much in Trump's orbit and was one of the few celebrities to attend Trump's New Year's Eve party down in Florida. So I think it's commendable to focus on troops. It's always commendable to focus on troops. I hope that Stallone is doing it also through charity, not just making movies, right? And I can see that maybe, American Sniper did quite well with another conservative director, Clint Eastwood. It did very well, although that wasn't an incredibly strong awards contender. However, of course, the real thing I think this is mirroring, and when I think when they get in the pitch room and they're telling the studios about this package, I'm sure they're all saying Hacksaw Ridge. Hacksaw Ridge, Mel Gibson's return to form. Mel Gibson, of course, is friends with Sylvester Stallone. They're all in the same circle here. And I think it's interesting that circle intersects with Donald Trump. And while Trump, I think, is a very divisive figure, he has a lot of support, particularly from the middle of the country. Although everyone has come to behind Hacksaw Ridge. That movie's really united people, I think, because just of the quality and the story that it's telling. And also because the face of it isn't Mel Gibson, but Andrew Garfield. But Sylvester Stallone will appear in this movie. I wonder how people feel about how he handled the whole Creed thing. We'll get to that in a moment. But anyway, Hacksaw Ridge is doing quite well, and so I think Sylvester Stallone, wants to ride that wave and get back into the awards circuit, because he didn't get that Oscar, as you might recall it. And he won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor, but Mark Rylance took home the Oscar, because I think of the drama that happened with Creed. Basically, what happened with Creed, just to refresh your memory, is that it was Ryan Coogler's idea to do a sequel to Rocky focusing on the son of Apollo Creed. And so he had to talk Sylvester Stallone into doing it. He co-wrote it with his own collaborator, Ryan Coogler, and he directed the film, and he directed Stallone to an Oscar, or an Oscar nominated and a Golden Globe winning performance. But again, this was not Sylvester Stallone's idea. It was all Ryan Coogler's. And then so, of course, when Sylvester Stallone wins the Golden Globe, he forgets to thank not only Ryan Coogler, but his co-star Michael B. Jordan. And it was pretty bad. And I do still believe that's what hurt him ultimately with getting the Oscar. That's why he didn't win the Oscar. But he wants to get back in there. And I just don't know if this would do as well. I mean, I think that Sylvester Stallone, after what happened with Creed, I don't know why Adam Driver wants to get anywhere near him, quite frankly. I'd be a little bit nervous about it. Maybe Adam Driver sees what American Sniper did for Bradley Cooper, what Hacksaw Ridge did for Andrew Garfield, and says, me next. And interestingly enough, Adam Driver and Andrew Garfield are currently co-starring in Silence. But this to me seems a little bit too much like it's trying to be Hacksaw Ridge, although the story does sound very inspiring. So I'm just not quite sure how I feel about it. Also, interestingly, Arnold Schwarzenegger is of course part of the same circle, and he took over The Apprentice, which Donald Trump is still executive producing, and it debuted on Monday, and it fell considerably in the ratings from previous seasons, prior to the whole Trump as president situation. And so I think the ratings were down almost 50%. So I'm just curious, I mean, especially if Stallone stays in Trump's orbit, will that help or hurt him? And is there room for another Hacksaw Ridge? It seems right in the very next year. It'll be interesting. I think sometimes the Academy likes to look for something new. But sometimes they also like something that has groundwork laid for it. It's complicated. All right, so that's the second story of the day. Now the third story of the day was a fascinating business story that broke yesterday afternoon that many of you sent to me, and that's that Europacorp has tapped out and trying to distribute films itself in the United States, and has made a deal with Styx Entertainment to become its U.S. distributor for several of its major upcoming films. And it's funny to me because of the Comic-Con statement that Luc Besson infamously made this year, where he said, "Watch out, Dunkirk, Valerian's coming for you. Watch out, Christopher Nolan, and look how much things have changed." But good for Luc Besson to realizing that they needed to change and not riding Valerian into the box office hell, lower rings, like Doctor Strangelove and the Nuke. But anyway, it's also, in this coverage though, talking about the Styx and Europacorp deal, it was revealed that Europacorp was supposed to have another partner for its U.S. distribution, and that was Relativity Media. But Relativity Media, of course, infamously went bankrupt. They're really struggling to come back. For a while, Kevin Spacey and his business partner were going to run it. I think they both actually have dropped out at this point. It looked like Relativity Media was going to rebound, but now it seems maybe not. So anyway, Europacorp found not a partner, so much because Europacorp and Relativity Media were going to found a third-party company called Red that they were going to together. But now the Europacorp films are just going to be distributed through Styx. So anyway, it's a 3-year deal, and it gives them immediate distribution rights to the upcoming Valerian, which cost $180 million to make. I don't think they're going to recoup that. I think it should have been obvious from their casting choices. But anyway, The Circle, which has a surprising amount of buzz with Tom Hanks and Emma Watson, but also Renegades, which is a J.K. Simmons and Sullivan Stapleton caper. And Sullivan Stapleton, is largely a TV talent, but also you might recall he was in the 300 sequel opposite Eva Green. So anyway, now Styx Entertainment is going to distribute those films, and Styx is pretty well positioned in the marketplace. Their biggest hit to date is Bad Moms, but they're gaining ground, and I think it's not. And they certainly get attention for their movies, like you might recall The Gift, Joel Edgerton's directorial debut. So Styx Entertainment, I think, isn't a slam dunk in distributing these movies, but I think they're certainly a better position to than Europacorp was with their U.S. Distribution division. But I think this also shows how hard it is for foreign distributors to make inroads into the United States. And so I think, we were keeping an eye on Europacorp and their films for that reason, but now I think any other foreign distributors are going to have to make relationships, just like Wanda Group has been doing, making relationships and sometimes outright purchasing Hollywood companies. Also, though, Styx, you might think, well, how did Styx Entertainment make inroads into Hollywood? They're a new distributor. Why couldn't Europacorp do the same thing? Well, Styx is made up of a number of executives from, studios, and they all went to start their own studio with Styx. For instance, the current chairman is Adam Fogelson from Universal, who already has a relationship with Luc Besson when they distributed Lucy. So Styx is working out because everybody who works there has a great, Rolodex already. For industry, nobody has a Rolodex anymore, but that's like the industry speak, right? So they have the connections, and so Europacorp is looking to use those. Although it's also worth noting that there's so many complicated, it's such you got to really know your players. And at Styx Entertainment, of course, they are very much in bed with a Chinese company called Hawaii Brothers. Every time you see a STX Entertainment movie, you'll see the Hawaii Brothers logo in front of it. And Hawaii Brothers really wanted to get into the U.S. marketplace themselves. So they did it by, China, it's interesting. China has really, been the only country to make serious headway into Hollywood, and that's because they found that money can open any door. So Hawaii Brothers has a deal with STX Entertainment because another 3-year deal, starting in 2016, last year, they are going to finance 18 films through STX. So they brought money to the table. And Europacorp is bringing movies that are much bigger than anything that STX has been able to put together. So it's a good deal for both companies. So very interesting. So in reality, you've got the United States, France, and China in one little space now. So let's see how they do. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. The viewer question comes from Daniel, a.k.a. Mr. D. Selinator. And Daniel says, "Hi, Grace. Happy New Year. I hope 2017 brings you many great things." Right back at you, Daniel. I have a question. So Ben Affleck's reputation among critics seems to have been hurt by his involvement in the DCEU as Batman. His potential awards contender, Live by Night, holds a 35% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it probably won't be getting any love from the Academy or the box office. We'll see how it does when it goes wide on January 13th. But as we discussed, it's bad. So anyway, Daniel continues saying, Margot Robbie seems to be going after awards with her upcoming projects, but will her role as Harley Quinn have a negative impact on her chances too? Well, it's a different situation, I think, Daniel, because Ben Affleck was in a very good space before he joined the DCEU. He'd won an Oscar for best picture with Argo, even though he'd been, he was struggling too with respect from Hollywood. Remember, he was infamously snubbed for a director's nomination, and many people felt that contributed to the Argo win for Best Picture, because people wanted to right that wrong. But, when he did Gone Baby Gone, The Town, Argo, he was in a really good space. And so that's why I think the Live by Night situation is so noticeable, because it's such a stark 180, right? But Margot Robbie is a cheesecake mainstream actress at this point in her career. And I think it's quite commendable that she's trying to change that. But she was never at the heights that Ben Affleck was in. So this is a mountain she's still trying to climb. So we're not talking about falling backward. We're talking about whether or not she'll be allowed to continue forward. Now, I think that with her role as Harley Quinn, it's unusual to have a female character who's just so popular. And it seems very much like, sometimes you can argue, like, is the cape and cowl wearing the actor, or is the actor wearing the cape and cowl? I think that Ben Affleck is a fantastic Batman, but I can see how other people might make the reverse argument. But I think with Harley Quinn, even though she's not the Harley Quinn from the animated series that so many of us fell in love with, but I think she's definitely her own version of Harley Quinn, quite potently, and I think a lot of that is owed to Margot Robbie's performance, and it's very much a performance. I think she's really, she's really dived into that character, takes it very seriously, is producing Gotham City Sirens along with David Ayer. So I think there's a lot of artistic, I think you can argue that there's like some artistic accomplishment there. So anyway, I think that's going to help her a little bit. Also, I think she has to be careful about her director choices. I think that it would be very smart for Margot Robbie, because when it's Live by Night, that's all Ben Affleck, right? He's the star, he's the director, he's the producer. But I think it's smart, and this is why, another reason that it's good that movies are a team business, is that you kind of hold other people's careers hostage, right? You go, okay, well, you might not think a lot of me, but you can't not think a lot of this director, right? So, or this writer, or this producer. And I think Margot Robbie isn't quite doing that as well as she should. I just talked about Denzel Washington in my Fences review yesterday, and how he should align himself with more prestigious directors. And some of you said, well, those directors don't hire black actors, but Denzel Washington is Denzel Washington. I think that once Denzel asks you if you want to work with him, although you guys pointed out he has a reputation for being difficult, it becomes harder for those directors to say no. Also, Denzel could do it publicly and really put them in the hot seat, and have the media be like, do you not want to work with a black actor, even though he specifically requested, you guys? He could do that. They probably wouldn't appreciate it, but desperate times can call for desperate measures sometimes. You use the tools that you have. But so anyway, I think Margot Robbie is making her first mistake as a producer, and that's that she's not putting together creative teams behind the camera that are hard for critics and the media to dismiss, right? So who she's actually chosen for her upcoming Terminal that she's producing is Von Stein. He only directed a short previously, and this is his first feature. That he also, I don't know if he did write it. But his previous gigs were second assistant director. Now, maybe it'll turn out great, like the John Wick guys, right? And also, interestingly, she married a third assistant director, a different guy, but, so she's finding a lot of talent in the assistant director pool. But, there's usually not a lot of talent there. It's not a prestigious place to start. So people aren't good. It's not like, oh, she picked a writer and moved them up, or a producer. I think that these are people that are going to have a hurdle, because, the media and critics can be a little snobbish, right? So I think that, Terminal's not in a great position, creatively behind the scenes. For I, Tonya, I think the Tonya Harding movie and having her play Tonya Harding is so great. I think it's such a wonderful idea. But I'm nervous about Craig Gillespie being the director that she's chosen. She's producing these movies. She has no one to blame but herself if they don't work out. But Craig Gillespie, he started out really well with Lars and the Real Girl and the United States of Tara on Showtime with Toni Collette. But then his career took a bad turn with Fright Night, although I actually liked Fright Night, the remake, but nobody else did. It did very poorly. Then he did the very bland $1 Million Arm for Disney, which nobody saw. And then he also did The Finest Hours for Disney, which I also quite enjoyed. So I think Craig Gillespie is talented. I like Lars and the Real Girl as well. But I think that if you look at his track record, I think that a lot of the times, and The Finest Hours did not do well. But a lot of times, critics and the media will just look at someone's IMDb page and be like, oh, flop, 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 flop. And none of these movies are like Fright Night, $1 Million Arm, and The Finest Hours. No one's like, oh, it should have done better, except for me. I'm like, it should have done better. But, they're not, there's no momentum, right? I think that Craig Gillespie's momentum is gone. And so that's problematic. So I think that as a producer, I like the projects she's choosing, but I don't think she's doing a good job putting together her teams behind the camera. So we'll see how. Her performances would have to be stellar, but she'd be helped out a lot if she had better people to lean on. So we'll see what happens, Daniel. That's my thoughts on it, and we'll see. We shall indeed see what happens. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't worry, I've saved those other stories that I didn't use for a potentially slower news day. So also, please write your thoughts down below of today's top 3 stories, Daniel's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.